What's your most shameful not safe from work moment? Not me, but when my parents were younger, my mom and dad were at his house having sex when my grandma, my dad's stepmom, suddenly announced she was coming up the stairs to give my dad his laundry. They both panicked. My grandma didn't even know my mom was there, so my mom ran into his closet and he stayed in his bed to cover up. My grandma walked in with his clothes and started putting them away, and she opened his closet to find my mom standing there, inches away from her face, completely naked. Without a word, my grandma shut the door and walked out of the room. And then later my mom had to stay for dinner. None of them have ever spoken about it. In my senior year of high school, I came home and could not find our dog. I looked all around the downstairs and the backyard. At this point panic ensued. I go upstairs and my stepsister's door is cracked. She's like 11 or 12 at this time. I open the door and there's our family dog going to town on my stepsister's butthole. First there was shock, then horror, from both parties, and I straight said okay what the fuck and went straight to my room. A couple minutes later, she opens my door and proceeds to beg me to not tell her dad, and I'm telling her to just be quiet and go to her room. I wasn't going to say anything. Well, her dad works split shifts, which means he works 4 hours on and 8 off. At this point it's time for him to be getting up, around 3 p.m., and she won't shut up. I'm imploring her to just go back to her room and be quiet. Next thing I know, her dad walks out of his bedroom and starts asking what's wrong. I tried hard to just tell him that it was nothing, but he was persistent. Finally, I had to tell him that I walked in on his daughter getting her asshole licked by Teddy. Fuck, it was awkward for a while. Unfortunately, for me, I still remember it every time I see her, and it's been almost 15 years. I think I'm more traumatized by it than anyone in our household. In general, I have an abnormal way of masturbation. To put it simply, it's like tensing muscles while in a plank position. So as a child, I used to do this, quite a lot. I thought this was the best shit in the world. Everyone should do this. It makes you feel so amazing, it's ridiculous. So, in front of my entire religious family at an event, I decided I needed to demonstrate my feel-good superpower. They were horrified. My mom had to give me a swift talking to and discuss how you don't do that in front of people. That's how I learned to keep it to myself. Boyfriend was eating me out. As I was about to come, it felt so good that I kinda lost control of my body and I farted right in his face. I showed my older sister my boner when I was about 7 or 8. I didn't know what it was all about at the time, but every time I think of it I pray she doesn't remember me doing that. When I was 17 and my girlfriend was 16, we were getting it hot and heavy in my room. The door had a decorative glass and iron part, and the glass was missing from an earthquake that shattered it months prior. It had just some cardboard to cover it. My sister, that was 27 at the time, was supposed to be at work, but she forgot something and came back. She heard my girlfriend moaning, and sure enough, she broke the cardboard a little to see inside my room. Immediately saw my girlfriend back as she was writing like her life depended on it. She started yelling some shit about me getting her pregnant. She was on the pill. My girlfriend got really embarrassed and scared my sister would tell her parents or family. It was shameful both to my girlfriend and me, but mostly cause if you hear a couple fucking, and you're mostly sure it's a family member, why the fuck would you try to see that? I had my girlfriend over and we were alone. Both completely stark naked and laying on my bed whilst I was performing an oral rendition. When we finished and got up, we realized her phone was filled with messages going. Her dad had been waiting outside to pick her up, and as the phone was on mute we ignored it. When we stood up, he was outside the window and saw each of us naked. At the same time my mum burst in the door to tell us her dad is waiting outside to pick her up. Turned out mum came home early from work. My girlfriend left in a rush and a panic. My mum though was shocked but calmed her, saying all is okay. Once my girlfriend was gone, my mum gave me an honest but fair conversation. I felt embarrassed and relieved but still felt told off. However, in the panic to get redressed and rush out to her dad, my girlfriend pocket dialed me and it left a long voicemail. I listened and she was properly ripped into by her dad in the car. I could hear her crying in the seat and just saying sorry. I felt terrible. I'm not religious, but the voicemail setup was something. When I was 16, I hit the jackpot when me and my family moved into a new place that had a separate house in the backyard. I had my own phone line, had cable, my own bathroom and shower, and a door that lead into a big enough garage that I could skate any time of the day without disturbing anyone. I mean, I had my own house. Perfect for what my girlfriend would come over. Lots of fun times. One day me and my girlfriend were chilling. I heard my parents drive off, or I thought I had. So we started to get busy. I was going down on her when out of the fucking blue the window next to my bed randomly opens and my stepdad and mom pop their head in and were like, "Hey guys, we're getting ready to head out." Oh. At that point mostly who they saw was my girlfriend because I was under the covers. I popped my head out and was like, "Oh, hey." They closed the window and I went outside to talk to them. At that point my girlfriend was in hysterics because she was completely humiliated. My mom ended up giving her a hug and saying it was okay and said they just wanted to see what we wanted for lunch. Pretty awkward. This didn't happen to me but to a friend of mine. He was a very large guy, like bodybuilding large, full of muscles and testosterone, so large and loud would be a good way to describe him. He was also hard of hearing since childhood, so even though he was in his early 30s he wore 2 earpieces as old people do. So one night he is at some social thing and meets a girl. He's a little hard to communicate with but they manage to work through that and she ends up over at his place. As he tells it, he's on top and he's got some good motion going and she looks him in the face and says Mufasa, and he thinks she is wanting him to roar like a lion because she obviously thinks he is as strong as one because of his muscular body and he's down for some roleplay, so he pauses and lets out the loudest most powerful roar he could possibly muster with his tit muscles tensing up and his butt muscles too clenched he could crack a nut, so loud he says he thinks he might have rattled the lampshade. He also felt her clench down on his dick from fright and that's when he looks down and sees her face in total shock and fear. They have an uncomfortable moment and he says, "You said Mufasa, like the lion?" And she lifts her head and says, "I said move faster." Needless to say, she went into a laughing fit with him sitting on the bed red-faced and limp-dick. She got dressed and left and he sent me a voice note later that night that had me laughing so hard I vomited a little. Good times. When we were 9 years old my friend, who lived next door, and I dressed up as princesses and had sword fights with our fully erect tweeners. His sister, who owned the dresses, caught us and told our parents. When I was 13 or 14, so this is 2003-2004-ish. The internet was fairly new and I was really getting into playing with myself. One day I decided to take a photo of myself erect. I was proud of it and wanted to see how it looked from a different angle. I had used a digital camera and plugged it into the family computer, the only one we had. I thought dragging and dropping the photo was the only way that photos got transferred, so after I checked out my masterpiece, I deleted it. Little did I know, it also transferred to a folder specifically for all the photos from the camera. So one day my dad and my best friend's dad are hanging out and doing something on the computer when he calls me down. I come down the stairs and horrifically see the photo of my erect dick on the screen. It felt like time stopped and I don't even know how I formed words in that moment but I immediately blurted out something along the lines of "It was only once" before I jetted to my room. Needless to say that was the last we talked about that, and the photo was finally fully deleted. I've since learned better and have a secret folder on an external hard drive for such things. Not that shameful but I had sex with my wife in her sister's bed. Her sister is a massive narcissistic bitch and that's all we thought we could do to get back at her. We were 20 at the time and her sister got a new mattress when we were around 24. Was fun knowing she didn't know. I took weed edibles with my partner and had a lovely giggly evening that climaxed with some really good high sex. We both went to sleep in the nude shortly after but a combination of my dizziness, the obscene amount of munchy snacks I'd eaten and the sudden and vigorous jiggling I'd given my stomach meant I woke up at about 2 a.m. needing to be sick. I clambered over my partner and ran for the bathroom which luckily was the door opposite my partner's bedroom. I burst out of the room but couldn't quite get the bathroom door open before I was sick down the wall and all over the floor. I then managed to open the bathroom door but I just collapsed into the bathroom and spewed again all over the floor. While I was crawling to the toilet hoping I could at least use it to catch the third round I heard the soft voice of my partner's mom say, "Could you get him some clothes please?" She had gotten up to use the toilet in the middle of the night at exactly the time I did. She was stood at the other end of the corridor with a perfect view of her daughter's fairly new boyfriend exploding out of their bedroom naked as the day he was born and being sick all over the walls and floor of their beautiful home. For the next hour I had to sit in my shame dry heaving over the toilet bowl while my none too happy girlfriend cleaned up around me. Once the bathroom floor was clean I was kindly handed some underwear to put on while my partner and her mom cleaned the hallway and put me back to bed. Amazingly I am not only still in a relationship with the girlfriend in this story but I actually live in a cabin with her on land owned by her parents and regularly interact with both her mom and dad. I was bitten by a girl who couldn't control herself during her orgasm in a 69. It was in the dark at her parents' house late at night. She mistook my blood for cum and my wails and pain as moans, thought she was doing a good thing and carried on until I bucked her off me. We switched on the light and it was like something from a horror film. Her sheets were a slight off-white, So it looked really bad and wasn't stopping. Because once blood flow is down there it sprays rather than dribbles. She had blood all over her face and chest, it was all over my legs and down there. Grabbing anything nearby to stem the flow, her immediate reaction was enough to wake her parents, who came into what I can only describe as a nightmare. At that point I was going white and almost passed out. To be fair to her dad, he seemed to ignore the fact his daughter had been giving me the old slobber globble and took charge, calling 911, I'm British but she lived in America. The paramedics laughed after basically doing this fancy tourniquet thing below the bite, and I had 2 stitches which you can no longer see. I can tell you, there's no pain quite like waking up with a boner when you have a serious injury down there. I fucked my car. I had a very unsatisfying hookup, and on the drive home everything was getting me frisky, the feeling of my clothes touching my body, the shifter in my hand as I worked through the gears. By the time I got home, I was so ridiculously horny that I threw a condom on the shifter and fucked the car. Is this a creation of Transformers?